Friday. So there's a lot of things I could talk about today, but as how it is when things come up, right? So I guess what I was thinking about just before I went live was is the concept of being down. Hey, Jeremy, what's up? I didn't say, is it selfish to be down in the dumps, to be in a bad mood, right? Um, I remember when I was growing up, we lived communally. Hey, Ashley, Melissa, wow, look at all these people jumping in. When I was growing up, we lived communally. And so it was considered, we were told that if you were upset about something, you needed to put on a happy face and you needed to not show it to other people because that was selfish. Because then, hey, look, hey, Harshita, good to see you. Good evening. That was selfish because if you were walking around with a sad or grumpy face on, then you'd be making everybody else around you feel bad and you'd be dragging them down in the dumps too, right? So nice to see you. So that was the premise that I grew up with. And I think that that had a negative effect on a lot of people because they felt like, well, I can't express my emotions or that negative emotions are just bad. I know I definitely grew up with that, that negative emotions are bad and that, they should not be expressed. Negative, like anger, frustration, sadness, just anything that, basically wasn't turning your mouth into a smile. Mm. And I remember having to talk about that with people later, and they were saying, you know, you need to learn to allow yourself to express or to feel these negative emotions. Because for a long time, I remember thinking, well, I don't even get angry. But I just didn't really recognize anger because in my mind, it was a negative emotion, something that you shouldn't feel. So I suppressed it and I ignored it and I like tried to make it into something else. I'm not angry. I'm just a little bit irritated, right? But everyone else could tell that I was angry. So um, that obviously that method doesn't work, right? That method doesn't work to try to just suppress it. And I think that's a lot of what went on or what goes on when you're with people who are telling you, you're not supposed to be angry or show emotion or show negative emotion, right? On the other hand, when you're in a relationship and I kind there's a way in which I can kind of see what they meant now because when you're in a relationship and you're connected to somebody, their emotions affect you very strongly. If they're down and they're upset about something, then especially if you're an empathetic or sympathetic person, then you can that can really upset you. That can throw you off balance as well, right? So I mean, part of our journey, I think, in accepting each other is to accept when the other person is having an emotion or feeling down or feeling upset about something, um, and not necessarily need to change them, but also not necessarily take it on ourselves, take on that emotion ourselves and let it get us down or make us feel bad or affect our day. So I think that's kind of maybe that's the balance that we're looking for, right? Because when I talk about taking responsibility for ourselves and the impact that we have on others as well, but also recognizing that other people, we choose how they affect us. Now, when someone is really close to us, like, like our spouse or something, then um, in that kind of relationship, they really are kind of part of us. So, how much choice do we have in how that affects us? Are we able to just kind of cut that out and just ignore it and say, okay, I'm not going to let that affect me, right? What is the, and I'm actually asking this, I'm actually like thinking about this and working through this in my mind as I talk about it, is what is the right balance there, right? What is the right balance there as far as when you are so intimately connected with somebody, that their emotions do affect you. We're not talking about just somebody outside, or even your boss, or your parents or something like that. You're talking about somebody that you live with and see all the time. So, I guess I'm trying to say, what's the right balance there? How much do we owe it to each other to bring ourselves back up to a sort of a place of balance ourselves, so that we're not affecting the people around us negatively that we care about? How much is it each of our own choices not to be affected negatively by someone else's emotions and sadness? And how much is it to allow perhaps emotions to come up, allow them to be expressed, allow them to be felt, and not feel like, well, this is just a bad emotion, so we need to shut it down and we need to just kind of, you know, put it aside. Right? I think that that's the interesting part, is there must be a balance between all of those things. And what is that balance, right? And I think part of it may just be a sequence, like, okay, we need to allow that emotion up. We need to allow it to express. We need to allow it to be, not judge it. And then at the same point, perhaps it has a defined lifespan, right? So when I talk to people about, like going back and doing deep healing work, right? Sometimes we have to go back into that place, into that emotional place, but we don't have to stay there. And when people talk about doing healing from trauma and other types of stuff, there is the importance to allow that emotion to come up, to allow it to flow through you and out of you, right? When we suppress the emotion entirely and we try to pretend we don't have it, or we try to just put on a happy face and ignore it, right? Then that's not healthy, because we're not allowing that emotion to flow through and to come up. But at the same point, if we continue with that emotion for hours and we allow that negativity just to like rest and reside in our body and in our space and in the air around us, and we don't allow it to flow through and out of us, right? To pass, allow it to pass, then we're also doing ourselves and those around us a disservice, I think. Harshita says, too difficult. What do you mean by too difficult? What does that mean? Hendrivik. Mm. Yeah, let me know what you mean by that. What do you mean by too difficult? So, and I think, I don't know, maybe that's the balance that we're looking for. And at the same point, when the other person who's there, who is, wants to help support and be sympathetic, the other spouse or whatever, and they may feel, um, you know, the other person's sadness or negativity or stuff may be affecting you negatively, and maybe making you feel down or feel upset. Then how do we deal with that as the other person? Oh, okay. So you're saying it's too difficult. Hey, Gabriel, it's too difficult to go back and think deeply again about our past pain. Yeah, so that is a great point, and I think for a lot of people, they really do think that that is too difficult to go back. And but this is what I tell them. This is what I say. There isn't really a reason to do it unless you have a path to healing. Okay, unless you know that you have the path to healing. So when I wrote about in this book, in I Own Me, I wrote in that book in chapter 5 about the actual step-by-step process for healing, for recovery from deep pain and trauma. And it's actually, there's like 12 steps, I guess. Maybe 9 steps, but you can do it to yourself. You can literally sit there for maybe an hour and a half on the couch and walk yourself through each of the steps, these psychological processes, until you come through on the other side, and you can make a massive shift in understanding and healing whatever that core pain or wound was. So when you know that, when you understand how to do that, and that you're only going back to revisit that deep pain just for a few minutes. You have to do it as part of the process, but when you understand you're only going there for a few minutes and, even a minute, whatever, and then you go to the next step and the next step and the next step, right? And at the end of that process is a wonderful sense of recovery and healing from this thing that happened. Then is when I say it's worth it. Then it's worth it to me to go back, because, like, why? We don't realize that we're experiencing pain all the time from these core wounds. It's just like an underlying subtle pain. Sometimes it might be a really strong, very obvious pain, and that turns people to alcoholism and drug use and stuff like that, right? But for a lot of us, it might be kind of a pain, like a low level pain, anxiety that's kind of under the surface, right? That's stemming from this core wound or this traumatic thing that happened to us. So instead of experiencing this long term pain, for me at least, I would rather go back in and just experience it for a very short time, right? In that more intense emotional side of it, and then be done with it, then be clear of it, right? Then clear it out of my system. See? So that's how I think about it. So to me, yeah, of course, you don't want to just go back, if like just to go back and do it. You don't want to go back and just wallow, just go back and, like, hang out there and relive this terrible traumatic stuff. And the thing is, there's some types of therapy which I feel like does that. And so I'm not too sure about some types of therapy that I feel like they just make you talk about it over and over and over again. They don't really take you through to the healing process at the end. So I only think that, like, for me at least, it doesn't make sense to go back and do it unless there's a healing there, unless there's healing through that process. That's the only reason it makes sense to me to do that. So when I talk about that, it's really only to do it as part of the healing process, as part of the entire process that you walk through. And when you get to the end of that process, after an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, you just feel amazing. And you've cleaned it out, right? You've cleaned it out of your system. So you don't have to worry about it anymore. And that's what's really cool. So yeah, I agree. And for most people, it's really difficult to go back and think about those things. But even just in our day-to-day lives, right? How are we handling or dealing with emotional upsets, right? How do we handle, like, how do I handle and deal with emotional upsets, or emotional upsets in my environment and the people around me? Because I have always tried to kind of keep a very positive outlook and to bounce back quickly, right? And so part of that is not having around me things or people that are negative. I don't listen to negative music. I don't listen to sad, depressing songs. I don't watch sad movies, right? And I don't listen to, like, I don't listen to the news, because a lot of that is just really miserable, fear-based propaganda that people are trying to, like, embed in your mind. So I will read stuff. I'll read certain highlights of what's going on in the world to try to understand what's happening in the world, but I don't just allow them to shove all of their negativity into my head, right? So that I curate what comes into my space, what comes into my world. But when we let someone else into our world, right? When we let another person into our world, then we also have to deal with all of that stuff, right? So how do I manage that is what I'm trying to learn. How do I understand how to manage that? How to allow someone to be who they are, to have the emotions that they have. Hey, Daniel. And yet at the same time, to be able to manage my own emotions, my own emotional state, and in such a way that it's not impacting me negatively. So that's all. I'm just kind of talking about it, I guess. I don't know that I have the solution for that, except some of what we've discussed, which I think is good guidelines around that. But I think that's an ongoing journey. That's the ongoing process and journey of relationship, right? Of relationship, managing our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with a significant other. So that's kind of kind of what I've been thinking about today, this morning. So I hope you guys have an amazing, amazing day. And let me know if you have any questions. Thank you for chiming in, Harshita. I appreciate your thoughts and your questions. And we will talk tomorrow. Now, remember, tomorrow is going to be later because, well, actually, it might be earlier or might be later. We'll see. I've got the Meet the Media thing tomorrow at 10 a.m. So I will either do my live tomorrow, either before it, a few minutes before it, or I will do it after that, sometime in the afternoon. So I hope you guys have a beautiful, amazing day, and I will talk to you later. Bye. Bye, Shita.